Zara Clement held her wrist up to catch the light in the middle of Sotto Voce on King Street, West, tilting the bracelet so the amethysts caught the pale January sun coming through the window, and told the women across from her that it had been a gift from a man whose wife had stopped appreciating beautiful things. The Aldwell Cuff, 7 Lake Superior amethysts, hand-set in pre-war Quebecois gold by a Mornall jeweler in the spring of 1962, commissioned by Edith Aldwell, who had been widowed at 38 with 3 children and a failing textile business, and had decided that the appropriate response to being left alone in the world was to make something that would last longer than the circumstances. It had passed to Edith's daughter on her wedding day. It had passed from her daughter to Claudia Harrington 40 years later, on the morning of Claudia's 40th birthday. In the same cedar box it had always lived in, with a note that said only, "You'll know when to wear it." Claudia was sitting 3 tables away when Zara said it. She had come to Sotto Voce for a working lunch with her assistant Lena. She had been halfway through a sightline discussion for the New Yorkville project when she looked up, and she recognized the bracelet before she recognized Zara. The particular way the gold caught the light, the asymmetry of the setting that looked like a mistake. Until you understood, it was the whole point. 7 amethysts, pre-war gold, her grandmother's handwriting almost translated into metal. She did not stand, she did not speak. She picked up her water glass with a steady hand, took a slow sip, and looked at Lena, who had gone completely still beside her. "Carry on," Claudia said. Lena looked at her for a moment, then she turned back to the mood board and carried on. "Before we go any further, drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see where this story reaches across the country, and maybe further than that. And if you haven't subscribed to Ivory Secrets yet, do it before you keep watching, because what Claudia Harrington does over the next 4 days is the kind of thing this city does not forget." The morning it really began, the one she would mark later as the line between before and after. Claudia woke at 5:40 in a penthouse on the 31st floor of a building in Yorkville that she had designed herself. Every surface, every sightline, chosen with the specific care of someone who understands that the spaces we inhabit are not neutral. Frederick had been sleeping in the guest suite since November, citing his back. The kind of explanation that invites no follow-up and answers none of the real questions. She was 48 years old. She had spent 22 of those years building Harrington's studio from a rented office above a dry cleaner on Queen Street West into one of the country's most respected interior design firms. She had designed hotel lobbies in Vancouver, a private library in Montreal, 2 of the most photographed residences in Toronto. She had raised a daughter, Natalie, now 23, and in her 2nd year of architecture school on the West Coast. She had attended every Meridian Gala since she was 31, first as a guest, then as a board member, and for the last 3 years as the recipient of the Aldwell Patron Award, named, with some ceremony, after her grandmother. She was not a woman who panicked. She was a woman who prepared. Her phone was on the nightstand. She saw a message from Lena, sent at 11:46 the night before, which told her Lena had spent 40 minutes debating whether to send it. "I'm so sorry to do this so late. I think you need to see something before anyone else does." Below it, a screenshot from a restaurant's Instagram. 4 women at a corner table, laughing, the image slightly overexposed the way those things always are, and on the wrist of the woman on the right, Claudia enlarged it twice, the Aldwell Cuff, 7 stones, pre-war gold. The specific asymmetry of the setting that her grandmother had insisted on, that the Montreal jeweler had called unusual, that Claudia had been looking at her whole life. She put the phone face down on the nightstand. She sat on the edge of the bed for exactly 1 minute, not panicking, sequencing. There was a time for each thing, and the order mattered. Then she dressed in dark trousers and a gray cashmere pullover. She had a board meeting at 9 that she would not cancel because she never canceled board meetings, and she went to the study. The safe was built into the wall behind the built-in bookshelves behind 2 rows of architecture monographs. Frederick knew. It was there. She had never given him the combination, and she had never thought twice about that because it seemed like kind of thing that didn't need explaining. She opened it. The cedar box was inside. She made herself breathe before she lifted the lid because she already knew what she would find, and there is a difference between knowing and seeing that she had always believed should be honored. A bracelet, 7 purple stones in yellow metal, the proportions nearly exact, the weight wrong by approximately 30 grams. She took it to the window. The central stone had 4 prongs. The Aldwell Cuff had always had 3. Edith had asked for 1 fewer than standard, just to make it hers. Claudia put the replica back in the box. She returned it to the safe. She closed the panel. She went to the kitchen, made coffee, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the city, which was still dark at 6 in the morning, the park, below bare-limbed and honest, the way January made things. She picked up her personal phone, the one with 4 numbers in it, and called the first one. "Leopold," she said when he answered. "I need you to pull everything. Joint accounts, corporate filings, the Aldwell Trust documentation, anything attached to Frederick's name. I need it on my desk before 5. Leopold Fairfax had been her family's solicitor for 19 years. He understood her voice the way a good doctor understands a patient's pulse. "How much are we looking at?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said. "That's why I'm calling you first." She hung up. She went to the board meeting. She chaired it, as she always chaired it, with focused precision. She did not think about the bracelet during the meeting. She had learned, over 22 years of difficult client conversations and more difficult personal ones, to compartmentalize not by suppression, but by sequencing. There was a time for the board meeting and a time for everything else, and the board meeting came first. Leopold arrived at 5 with a leather briefcase and the face of a man who has spent the afternoon with a diagnosis he doesn't want to deliver. He set a single summary page on her desk and stood back. She read it without speaking. Over 3 years, Frederick had redirected $7.2 million from a subsidiary account tied to the Aldwell Family Trust into a numbered company registered in Alberta. No declared commercial purpose. Established 11 months before the guest suite arrangement began. Harrington Studios' equity structure had been quietly adjusted to reduce her stake by 4%. Technically within board authorization, never disclosed to her directly. He had been building an exit. That was the only coherent reading. Quietly, methodically, would stay invisible until the time he chose to make it visible. Until he filed, on his schedule, with her, negotiating from reduced ground and not entirely certain why. "How long do we have to challenge the Alberta transfers?" she asked. "The trust has standing to seek an injunction today. I can file Monday morning." Monday, the Meridian Gala, was Saturday. Claudia looked at the document for a moment, then she folded it and placed it in the folder she had already labeled, in her own handwriting, for Monday. "Saturday 1st, she said. Leopold nodded once. He did not ask why. "The filing will carry more weight with public context behind it," he said. "Yes, it will." After he left, she sat alone in the study for 3 minutes. Not to think, she had already thought. Just to be in the room with everything she now knew, before she began doing something about it. Then she called Dorothea Kwan. Dorothea was 72, had been a fixture of Toronto arts patronage for 4 decades, and had the particular quality of a woman who has sat in enough important rooms to know which ones actually matter. She had been a close friend of Claudia's mother for 30. She was not exactly a godmother. She was something more practical. "I know," Dorothea said before Claudia finished the first sentence. "Half the room at the St. Regis saw the photograph by noon. I've been waiting for you to call." Claudia told her everything. The safe, the replica, Leopold's afternoon of document pulling, the $7 million, the numbered Alberta company. She told her about the Meridian Gala and what she intended. There was a silence on Dorothea's end that felt less like hesitation and more like construction. "He'll bring her," Dorothea said. "I think so. She'll wear it. She thinks it's real, and those women she lunches with will all be in that room." Yes. The seating committee owes me considerably, Dorothea said. What do you need? I need it known I'm attending alone. I need the right people watching when I arrive. And I need Zara Clement seated somewhere with excellent lighting, and no proximity to anyone who would think to shield her. Dorothea made a sound that contained both admiration and satisfaction, and for yourself. I've already called Sabine, Claudia said. Sabine Osi worked out of a studio on Spadina Avenue and made things that felt structural without announcing themselves. Dorothea paused. Then she said, with the particular warmth of a woman who has known someone long enough to be pleasantly surprised by them, "Of course you did." Sabine arrived the following morning with 2 options, and the shared understanding that only one of them was actually a choice. A structured midnight blue jacket and matching trousers, not a gown, because Claudia had never done gowns, and the Meridian crowd knew that, with a silk lining in deep amber that caught light only when she moved. The collar, high and architectural, designed to frame the throat in a way that made jewelry unnecessary. What mattered was not what she would wear at her wrist. It was what would be missing there. The bare wrist is the statement, Sabine said, adjusting the shoulder seam. Yes, Claudia said. Sabine nodded and went back to work. On Thursday, Leopold called with the full picture, which was worse than the summary. Additional transfers through a Vancouver-numbered company. Total redirected. Closer to 9 million. He had done it the way careful people dismantle things. Incrementally, over time, trusting that patience and the appearance of normalcy were sufficient camouflage. He assumed you wouldn't look, Leopold said. She thought about that. Not that Frederick had believed she was incapable of looking, that he had trusted she wouldn't. Because she loved him, because she was busy, because that was the shape of assumption that erodes over 23 years of shared life, if you allow it. He had been right about the love. He had been wrong about everything the love was supposed to prevent. File Monday at 8, she said. Papers are ready. That evening she worked on the Yorkville presentation until midnight because it was due Tuesday, and the quality she owed. Her clients did not diminish because her marriage was unraveling. The phone rang at 4:17 on Friday afternoon. Unknown number, she answered. Is this Claudia Harrington? Young voice, carefully controlled in the way voices are when someone is nervous and working hard not to sound it. Who is this? A breath. My name is Zara Clement. 4 seconds of silence. Claudia counted them without meaning to. She said nothing. She waited. I know you have no reason to want to hear from me, Zara said. I'm not calling to apologize, exactly. I'm not sure I've earned that yet. But I need to ask you something. Ask it. The bracelet. A pause. Frederick told me it was in storage, that it hadn't been worn in years, he said. She stopped. Started again. He said you'd agreed it could be given away. Claudia said nothing. That's not true, is it? My grandmother made that bracelet in 1962, Claudia said, and her voice was even, entirely even, the way she had taught herself to keep it over decades of rooms where evenness mattered. It passed to my mother. It passed to me. Frederick had no right to give it to anyone. A long exhale. I had it looked at, Zara said quietly. When I started wondering, the appraiser confirmed it. A pause. I didn't know. I believe you, Claudia said, and she did, which was its own kind of complicated. What are you going to do? Zara asked. Claudia thought about Saturday evening, the Art Gallery of Ontario, the Grand Staircase, Dorothea's phone calls, and Sabine's jacket and Leopold's folder, waiting for Monday morning. She thought about Frederick, in the guest suite 4 doors down the hall, who believed this was a difficult period in a long marriage, and nothing more. I'm attending the gala tomorrow night, she said, and I'm going to take back what's mine. All of it. A pause. What you do with that information is your decision. Silence. Then, with the flat quality of something already known being said aloud for the first time, he doesn't love me. Does he? Claudia looked out at the city. She thought about all the sharp and accurate things she could say. She chose a different one. Wear the bracelet tomorrow, she said. Come to the gala, and when the moment comes, let me handle the rest. Why? Because what needs to happen in front of the people who should see it. And because the bracelet is the last piece of something that needs to be completed. She paused. And because what he did to me, he did to both of us. With different tools, but the same disregard. A very long silence, then, all right. Claudia hung up. She sat for a moment with her hands flat on the desk. She had not planned the phone call. She had not planned Zara. But she had learned over 22 years of designing spaces that had to adapt to the people who actually lived in them. That you built for the structure, you understood, and then improved the plan when the room showed you something new. You didn't lose the plan. You improved it. She sent one text to Dorothea, "Everything is ready." The reply came back in under a minute. "So is the room. She's at table 14, East Alcove. He's at 22 service quarter side. He'll find out when he arrives. Get some sleep. You'll want to be rested for what you're about to do beautifully." Claudia arrived at the AGO at 8:40 on Saturday evening and sat in the car for 3 seconds after it stopped. 3 seconds of absolute stillness. The weight of the jacket at her shoulders, the city moving outside the tinted window. Everything she knew and everything she was about to do with it, held in that small interval. Then she opened the door herself and stepped out. January air, sharp and clean. The kind that sharpens you rather than dulls you. She heard cameras from the press contingent on the steps. She had timed her arrival deliberately, 20 minutes past the entrance rush, when photographers were restless and the steps had thinned. She walked at the pace Sabine had suggested. Not slow, purposeful, the pace of someone who already knows where everything is. Dorothea found her inside in 40 seconds. "He's here," Dorothea said quietly, not breaking stride so that they were simply two women, walking. There was a brief scene about the table. He accepted 22, without making it worse, which means he still believes this evening is manageable. Where is she? Table 14, she arrived early. The bracelet is on her wrist and entirely visible. A pause. She looked for you when she came in. And the press? Cressida Walsh from the Globe is near the north entrance. Dorothea permitted herself one small satisfied pause. She owes me considerably. Claudia moved through the room the way she had always moved through rooms. Not announcing herself, not deferring, fully present, giving complete attention to whoever she stopped to speak with. She found a cluster near the East Gallery. Bronwyn Park from the AGO board, her old professor Hugh Aldgate, a couple from the Meridian Foundation. She joined the conversation. She asked about the new contemporary wing. She listened. She felt Frederick before she saw him, some shift in the current of the room 2 groups away. He came around to her left. She gave him the same half-second she had always given him, noting the tuxedo, the careful hair, the expression reaching for neutral and landing, somewhere closer to contained. His eyes moved over the jacket, and then to her wrist, bare where the cuff always sat in photographs, in memory, in the long record of formal evenings they had attended together. She watched him register it. "Can I speak with you?" he said, privately. "Of course," she said. "After dinner." She turned back to Bronwyn. "You were saying about the East Wing lighting." Claudia, the edge in his voice was faint but present. She looked at him one more time. She let him see, clearly and directly, that she was not afraid of this conversation and was not having it on his schedule. "This is not the moment, Frederick," she said quietly, "and you know it." He looked at her for 3 seconds. Then he turned and walked away. Bronwyn found something very interesting on the far wall. Hugh Aldgate's eyebrows rose and held. Claudia returned to the conversation as if nothing had interrupted it, because nothing had not really. The actual thing had not happened yet. The seating bell rang. The room organized itself. Claudia moved to table 1, the Aldwell patron table, at the center of the room, the one she had occupied for 3 consecutive years. Dorothea to her left, Bronwyn to her right. From where she sat, table 14 was clearly visible. Zara Clement was already in her seat. The east, alcove lighting soft and complete, round her the amethysts, catching it the way only the real ones would. The white dress, made them unmissable. Zara looked across the room. She found Claudia's eyes across 30 feet of gallery floor and held them. Claudia looked back, not unkindly, not warmly, but with the full settled weight of a woman who has made every decision she intends to make and is simply waiting for the moment. Then she looked away and asked Bronwyn about her daughter, who was studying urban planning at Waterloo, and listened with genuine interest to the answer. Dinner proceeded, first course second. Claudia ate, talked, and tracked with quiet peripheral precision, exactly where Frederick sat, what the quality of his stillness communicated. And when Cressida Walsh had shifted from the north entrance, where she now stood with her recorder, just below visible. At 9:40, Dorothea leaned in. "Bernard is aware you'd like time during the remarks." "He gave me 3 minutes," Claudia said. "I called him Tuesday." Dorothea looked at her for a moment, with the expression of a woman who has known someone for a long time and is still occasionally delighted. Bernard Whitford, the Foundation's chair, spoke at 9:48 about the grant recipients, the Aldwell Legacy Fund, the 31 consecutive years this community had gathered to affirm that culture was worth sustaining, warm, practiced, genuine. Then he said, "I'd like to invite Claudia Aldwell Harrington to say a few words." He used both names, Aldwell first. She had not asked him to do that. She stepped to the microphone. The room went quiet, not the polite half-attention of an audience expecting the expected, but the particular stillness of a room that has sensed something. She placed both hands on the edges of the lectern, not gripping, resting. "The Meridian Gala has been part of my life since I was 31, she said, her voice even, warm, fully projected. "My grandmother Edith Aldwell came to this gala, or its earlier form, from its beginning. She believed that the people who gathered in rooms like this one were not here merely to be seen, but to see each other clearly. To hold one another accountable for what we said, we stood for." The room was completely still. "I've been thinking about accountability this week," she said, "about what it means to look at a situation honestly, and respond to it honestly, even when the honest response is more difficult than the alternative." A pause, not for effect, though it functioned as one for breath. "Many of you know the Aldwell Cuff," simply said. "My grandmother made it in 1962, and wore it to events like this one for 30 years. My mother wore it after her. It has been in our family for over 60 years. It is not a piece of jewelry. It is a record of who we are and what we have chosen to build and protect across 3 generations of women who believe that what you make is only worth having if you are honest about how you made it." She looked out at the room. She found Dorothea, steady in her seat, watching with the calm of a woman who has spent a week helping build this moment and intends to enjoy every second of it. She found Cressida Walsh, recorder raised almost imperceptibly. She found Bronwyn Park, who had gone very still. She found Frederick, looking at her, with the expression of a man who has felt the ground shift beneath him and does not yet know in which direction he is going to fall. She found Zara Clement, 30 feet away in the corner, looking at Claudia, with the expression of someone who made a phone call 24 hours ago and made a promise and is now understanding fully what that promise required. "I'm telling you this," Claudia said, "not because I want your sympathy. I have never wanted that. I'm telling you because this community, this room, these people, is the community my family helped to build, and it deserves to know what the Aldwell name represents, and what I intend to protect," she paused, "and to know that I am still here. Standing at this microphone in my grandmother's tradition, not broken, and not diminished, and not going anywhere." The applause began with Dorothea and moved through the room the way certainty does. Not fast, but complete. She walked back to her table, at the pace Sabine had given her, which was also the pace she had always walked at, which was the pace of someone who's not hurrying, because nothing is pulling away from her. She was nearly at her chair when she heard the shift in the room's attention, a change in the current, a small collective reorientation. She didn't turn. She sat down. She picked up her water glass. Dorothea touched her arm lightly. "She's coming." Zara Clement crossed the room the way someone crosses a room when they have made a decision and are executing it before they can reconsider. She was 26 years old, and she was wearing the Aldwell Cuff and a white dress, and an expression that had moved well past performance into something that cost her something real. She stopped 2 feet from Claudia's chair. "Mrs. Harrington." "Zara." Zara reached up and unclasped the bracelet with both hands. Her hands were steady. Claudia suspected that steadiness was costing her considerably. She held it out. 62 years of Aldwell, 7 amethysts, pre-war gold, lying across her open palm. "This belongs to you," she said. "It always did." Frederick said her name from somewhere to the left, a warning, flat and too late. Zara did not look at him. "He told me you agreed," she said, looking only at Claudia. "He told me it had been stored away and wasn't being used. He told me a lot of things." A pause. Her voice had gone slightly unsteady at the edges. The first visible evidence of the effort this was costing her. "I'm not doing this for any reason, except that I refuse to be someone who kept a thing that wasn't hers, because asking was harder than not asking." Claudia reached out and took the bracelet. The weight of it was exactly right. Not a replica's approximation, the specific living weight of something that had been held for 60 years by people who understood what it was. She closed her fingers around it. "Thank you," she said quietly. She meant it exactly as much as it sounded. Zara nodded once. Then she turned and walked back across the room without looking at Frederick. There was something in how she carried herself set. Straight, unhurried, the posture of someone moving correctly through a difficult thing that Claudia found herself unexpectedly respecting. She looked at Frederick. He was standing at the edge of the table, the composure still on his face but structural. Now, held in place the way a wall holds after the foundation has already shifted. He was looking at where Zara had been, and then at the bracelet in Claudia's closed hand, and his face was the face of a man, watching several things collapse simultaneously and being unable to prioritize which to address first. "Sit down," Claudia said quietly. He didn't sit, but he pulled the empty chair beside her, the one that had been placed there deliberately, and lowered himself into it, and she could see the calculation running behind his eyes, which version of this evening was still recoverable. None of them were. The room had already decided. "What have you done?" he said. It came out without the control he intended. "I've been transparent," she said pleasantly. "With a community I've belonged to for 17 years, about my family's history and my family's property. Is there something about that you'd like to dispute in front of these people, who are all listening?" He looked around the room. She watched him read it. Cressida Walsh, Dorothea, Bronwyn Park, Bernard Whitford, the 50-some faces turned toward them. With various degrees of subtlety, she watched him understand what the room had already decided, and that he had not been part of the decision. Something dropped in his face. The performance gave way to something underneath it, smaller and more honest than anything she had seen from him in a long time. "I never wanted it to go this way," he said. "I know," she said. "You wanted it to go your way, quietly on your schedule, with me having considerably less information than I currently have. You were building an exit, Frederick. 3 years of careful, patient construction, trusting that I wouldn't look until it was too late to matter." She held his gaze. "What I find most difficult is the patience of it. I know what patience costs, and you spent yours on this." He was silent. "Leopold files Monday at 8, she said, and kept her voice at the same pleasant register she had maintained since he arrived at her chair. "The trust injunction covers all the Alberta accounts. Your solicitor will hear from him by 9. I'd suggest you instruct them to cooperate fully." A pause. "I am not interested in destroying you publicly. I never was. I'm interested in what's mine. All of it, back." He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes, not grief exactly, not remorse exactly, but the particular recognition of a man who has been extremely intelligent his entire life and has for the first time fully encountered the cost of having applied that intelligence in entirely the wrong direction. He stood, he straightened his jacket. He looked at the room one more time. Reading it the way a person reads something, they can no longer change. The story had been told. It had been told by a woman at a microphone who had meant every word of it. And it had been received by a room full of people who would carry it for years, and there was no version of this evening left to manage. He left without saying anything else. She watched him collect his coat at the far door. She watched him walk through it. The room exhaled, conversations resumed. Not the same conversations. Not the same room. But the particular released, alive kind of talk that follows when something true has happened in a space where truth is not always the first language. Dorothea's hand found hers briefly under the table, one firm, confirming pressure. Cressida got all of it, Dorothea said quietly, the bracelet return especially. Good. Bronwyn Park leaned in from the right. That, she said, with the careful precision of someone choosing words deliberately, is the most remarkable thing I have seen in this room in 20 years. It was the most necessary, Claudia said. That's a different thing. She looked toward table 14. Zara's chair was empty. She had slipped out sometime in the last few minutes, quietly without announcement. Claudia hadn't seen her go. She hoped, in the distant and genuine way, that you hope things for people you have no obligation to, that Zara Clement would be all right. The young woman had walked into a situation she hadn't been permitted to understand clearly, done the wrong things, for reasons she'd been deliberately misled about. And, when the truth became unavoidable, had done the right one without being asked twice. That counted for something. In Claudia's experience, it usually did. At 11, Dorothea announced she was leaving. They held each other for a moment, the specific embrace of two women who have known each other, through enough difficulty, to understand what a good embrace after a hard-won evening actually contains. Your grandmother would have been here for all of it, Dorothea said. I know, Claudia said. I felt that. She left the gallery at 11:15. She walked down the steps of the Agio and into the January cold and stood for a moment on the sidewalk, feeling the full weight of the week, what it had cost and what it had restored, both real, both hers to carry. The car was waiting. She got in. She closed her eyes for 30 seconds and herself feel, completely, and without management, everything the last 5 days had been. Then she opened her eyes. 3 messages, Leopold, all set for 8 a.m. Monday. Papers are ready. Well done. Natalie from Vancouver sent 11:07 Mom. I just saw something on Dorothea's Instagram. Can you call me? You know everything. And one from a number she hadn't saved. She opened it. You were right. About all of it. I'm sorry it took this long. Thank you for letting me do the right thing. A single initial below it, Z. Claudia read it twice. She put the phone in her bag. She was still holding the Aldwell Cuff in her right hand. She had not put it back in the cedar box yet. She turned it over. In her fingers, 7 amethysts, pre-war Quebecois gold, the asymmetric setting her grandmother had insisted on, the weight that was exactly right because it had always been exactly right. She thought about Edith, widowed at 38, who had decided the appropriate response to difficulty was to make something lasting. She thought about her mother, who had worn this bracelet to this building in another decade and another version of this room. She thought about the note that had come with the cedar box on her 40th birthday. You'll know when to wear it. She put it on. The clasp settled the way it always had, with the specific small click of a thing that belongs where it is. The car moved through the January city, lights running past, the park dark, the long grids of a Toronto night familiar and cold and entirely, unambiguously hers. She had the bracelet, she had the trust, she had Leopold's papers, and Monday morning, and Natalie's voice, asking to come home and Dorothea a phone call away, and the particular irreversible quiet of having done the thing that needed doing, and having done it as cleanly as it could be done. She leaned back in her seat and looked out at the city she had lived in for 20 years, the city that had watched her build and had now watched her do this. And she felt, for the first time since the photograph arrived on her phone in the early dark of a January morning, something that was not strategy and not composure and not the disciplined management of what she knew. Something quieter than all of that. Something that arrives not when a crisis ends, but when you stop running from what is true and start walking toward it, and find standing there that you were always exactly enough. The car moved. The city held everything it always held, and Claudia Aldwell Harrington rode through the middle of it. And the bracelet sat exactly where it belonged, and she was ready for whatever came next, which was, as it had always been, a beginning.